Well, joining me is the panel, Liberal Senator James Paterson, and making his way to the chair, former Labor Minister and our Sky News host, Graham Richardson. We'll come to him when he's in the chair. Albanese's speech, try and tell me what was good about it.
That's a very hard question to charitably answer,
Well,
Andrew.
let me give you something that some papers have claimed. That was him saying there's going to make a big push to get more protections for workers in the gig economy, you know, like Uber drivers and things.
Yeah, that sounds to me like new regulation of the gig economy, which will completely stifle it. I mean, the really only substantive policy idea in Anthony Albanese's speech today was for a new bureaucracy. Now, I'm not sure that's going to create the jobs of the future, a new government department, but that's what Anthony Albanese was proposing today.
That at least coal is good because it can be used to build more wind farms. I mean, really?
Well, I mean, that's better than what we've heard from Labor leaders in recent years, so I guess that's an improvement, Andrew.
How's this going to sell to the workers? I mean, I'm all for helping Labor connect with workers if it's really seriously going to represent workers, but that ain't it.
And that's the thing, Andrew. This speech was really platitudes about how Anthony Albanese and Labor supports jobs. Well, no Labor leader would ever say that they don't support jobs, but what he didn't do is walk away from the policies that they took to last election, which are anti-jobs, whether it's on emissions reduction or taxation. Fundamentally, they had an anti-jobs agenda, and he hasn't changed that at all.
But listen, you guys are also having disagreements. What do you make of Resources Minister Matt Canavan? He's just said he's guilty as charged. So, he's guilty as charged. He did, in fact, have a huge fight with Prime Minister Scott Morrison, where he was heard yelling, "This is effed." You know, expletive not deleted in his case. He's apparently angry, like several other Nationals MPs, that Morrison is on a go slow. Your leader's on a go slow on this feasibility study for a coal-fired power generator in Queensland that the Nats are really keen on. Where do you stand on this?
I wish I could say it was out of character for Matt, but reading that article this morning, I did laugh to myself and say, yeah, that sounds like Matt. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I respect and value him as a colleague. He fights hard for the people that he represents, particularly... Well, I mean, and maybe I wouldn't advocate doing that, Andrew, but Matt is really passionate, particularly about North and Central Queensland.
Where do you stand on this generator?
Well, I'm someone who is sceptical about government support for energy, taxpayer support for energy. I'd rather they stand on their own too.
I think he's worried about talking about coal.
Well, you asked me where I stand. I think I have a principled position that as far as possible, government should be getting out of the energy business, not into the energy business. And I want to see fewer taxpayer dollars being spent, not less. And that's across the board, Andrew, whether it's renewables or coal or any other form of energy. I'd like to see them stand on their own 2 feet.
You still didn't quite answer the question, but anyway. Graham Richardson, thank you so much for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it. Just want to go back to Albo's speech. It was meant, as I said at the start, to sort of reconnect Labor to the workers that are lost in the last election. How do you think he did?
I think he did pretty well. I mean, I think he did a lot better than Kim Carr did on the front page of the paper today. So it was a big improvement on that, I thought.
Yeah, but what made you a supporter of it?
Well, I think what you're looking at here is just an attitude. And what I want to see from the Labor Party is the Labor Party looking back to its base and making sure that it doesn't become simply a party of clever hirelings who aren't ever going to be of the base or understand it. I much prefer to think that we can get some people from it. And we've stopped doing that for too long, Andrew. I think way too long. And I think what Albo wants to do is redirect us back to where we came from. And I think that's a good thing. Not in terms of going backwards on policy, but in terms of who do you look after? What's your primary purpose? Why are you in government? They're the questions that Anthony wants to answer. And I think it's a long time since a Labor leader really took the trouble to do that.
Yeah, but Graham, I'm still disturbed by the fact that he's still trying to sell the workers global warming, although obviously heavy industry, like smelters and things, they're the first to go. In fact, the smelters are already thinking about pulling out of the country. He's still trying to sell them global warming rather than rework Labor's passion for this, new religion.
Well, I think this new religion is spreading, whether we like that or not, it's a fact, because it seems that I know that he's already religious, but Scott Morrison seems to be picking it up a fair bit. He's talking up climate change and what he's doing about it. I think as long as you find the Liberal Party adopting it, hardly likely, therefore, the Labor Party will walk away. It means that they have to embrace it even more closely. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but that's how it's working. I mean, Morrison, I think, has surprised Labor by walking down that path. I think he surprised a lot of his colleagues as well.
Where are you on this global warming position of the government? You know, all these targets and all that, no winding them back, and stop pulling faces like this is a real tough one.
I'm not pulling any faces at all, Andrew. I think the contrast couldn't be clearer between the government and the opposition on this. I mean, I want to pay tribute.
What about your position? Because see, this is what gets me. The Liberals say our position at least is not as bad as Labor. That does not make it a good position.
Well, I think it's objectively defensible position, Andrew. It's the targets that we've set are very measured, they are very achievable. It's not really feasible in this day and age for Australia to say we're going to be the only country in the world that does nothing on this, but nor should we be the only country in the world saying we're going to destroy our economy to achieve economic nirvana or environmental nirvana by going ahead of the world. So I think the reality is there's just an expectation that countries make a contribution, and the only question is what's a reasonable contribution to make, and I think we've fallen in the right place.
Mate, while politicians still won't say, hey, listen, this global warming fear-mongering is way over the top, and what we do is actually more painful than, hurt more than gain from it, you're always going to lose the argument. This is my thing. But anyway, I'm not going to put you on the spot on this. Graham, James raised before, government spending. He likes cuts in government spending. I can suggest a few in this next segment. On the government-funded Conversation website, and on the government-funded ABC is this article by the government-funded academic based on his government-funded research suggesting the government cut funding to private schools because private schools, he says, private students at secondary schools drive on average nearly twice as far to their school. And this bloke says that private schooling has a disproportionate impact on traffic congestion. The Commonwealth has options should it wish to tighten up, and this would include not financially supporting any new private schools located far from existing communities or good public transport services. What do you make of research like that saying, hey guys, if you're too far from the private school of your dreams, you're not going to get funding?
I think the weird and the wacky still exist. I think this is a ridiculous analysis, absolutely crazy. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't travel to the school of your choice. And if we're going to say you must go to your local school no matter what, otherwise you'll be in a car and that'll help with the traffic jam come along, well then I think we're just getting way over the top. This is stupid. I mean, what I'd like to see from people is just sitting back and taking a calm look at these things. And when you see that, the idea that mum and dad can't drive their children to a school that's 8 or 10 k's away is absurd. If that's the school of their choice, they've got every right to get their child there, and if they want to drive them there, that's fine by me.
What do you make of this, James?
Andrew, this is one of those ideas that is so stupid only a smart person could have come up with it. I mean, it's just...
Look at the taxpayer funding that went into it.
It's absurd. And what I really hate about this is it's making judgments about people's decisions. It's the job of governments to provide good infrastructure for people to use for whatever purpose they want to use it for. And it is definitely not the job of government to second-guess that uses that people are going to make. If you want to drive 30 kilometres to go to a good private school or take your kid there, good on you, I say. And it's our job to make sure you can do that as efficiently as possible by providing the road infrastructure to do it. It's outrageous moral judgment on this.
But when you look at this, James, it makes me think again. If you took public funding out of the arguments, anyone mounting arguments, and just put everyone on the same sort of financial footing, raise the money yourself from consumers or business or whatever, where would the left be? I mean, this study had a number of grants. It's a government-funded academic in government-funded outlets pushing this anti-conservative or an anti-free choice agenda.
That's a really fundamental point, Andrew, and it's replicated across governments. So many of the people that are out there advocating against our liberties and for higher taxation, more government spending, are themselves funded by government spending and our taxes. And I think, really, in what world would people privately donate their own funds to fund this kind of research? If they want to, sure, knock yourselves out. But don't take your and my taxes to fund your arguments to take even more of your and my taxes.
Oh, so defund the ABC. I'm liking where you're going with this. But Graham, if the left, speaking broadly, did not get taxpayer-funded assistance in mounting its arguments, where would the left be in Australia?
Fair bit of strife, I imagine. because it's a remarkable the number of people in academia, etc., who are of the left who are on the government payrolls. There's no doubt about it. In fact, in some areas they dominate. So they obviously do very well out of the government purse. But that having been said, they have every right to. I mean, that's what universities are for. They are going to be on the government purse, and if you work there and you're some sort of a scholar, then I suppose you've got every right to get your salary, and we can't complain. What we can complain about, however, is what we allow to go on at those universities. My main concern with universities, which I've said for many years now, is that free speech is dead on our campuses. And I think that is the absolute disgrace.
I'm afraid you're right. Graham Richardson, James Paterson, thank you both so much for your time.